Hi there! Welcome to On the Flip Side, a podcast for anyone who wants to live their best sales life. We're going to be talking to buyers, sales managers, SDRs, and A's about things like what does it take to be a great sales manager? Or how can you go home happy month after month? So let's dive right in. Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of On the Flip Side with Wingman. I'm Kushal, and today we're joined by someone who's got a ton of experience in sales and specifically in scaling up sales team and processes. He runs his own business, runs a podcast, he's co-authored a book, runs one of the most popular sales communities, and I'm sure runs every day to stay healthy as well. Great to have you on the show, Scott Leese. Thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Great. Scott, so, obviously I gave a short introduction to you, but I'd kind of love to hear from you about what it is that you do and really maybe tell us the first thing that you sold like ever.
Oh man. Okay. What I do right now, I run my own sales consulting business, and I serve as a strategic advisor for 8 to 10 companies at a time around the world, and kind of help them build out their initial sales playbook and go-to-market strategy, and get the messaging right, get the sales process right, and bundle in some recruiting services as well as I leverage my network via LinkedIn and places like that. That's my main job. I also run a business called Surf and Sales, which is a sales and leadership summit that has a podcast associated with it called the Surf and Sales Podcast. And I run Thursday Night Sales, which is the world's longest running, largest virtual sales happy hour. So I have a lot of fun with that as well. And I've written 2 books, and I have a 3rd book coming out in a couple months that I'm pretty excited about, which is it about sums up all the cookie jars I have my hand in, so to speak.
Wow, Scott, it sounds like you probably have more than the usual hours that all of us have, right? You got some hidden hours.
Yeah, I'm squeezing things in when and where I'm, taking my kid to baseball or soccer practice and sitting in my car and doing work and trying to get things done like that. So try to be as efficient as possible. And the first thing I ever sold, back to the other question, I sold online lead generation tools for real estate agents and brokers and automotive dealerships. This is in like 2004, I think. That's the first sales job I ever had.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Just curious, so what was maybe your top learning from that first experience?
My biggest learning from the first experience was just like how hard sales was and how important it was to stay confident and find a routine and stick with that process once you find something that works. That's by far my biggest lesson that I learned from that job.
Got it. Yeah, I think sales can be pretty challenging. I'm sure about that when you're kind of starting out. And from what I understand, this is, like you said, something that you're kind of working with a lot of companies on, right? About setting up their strategy, their playbooks, their go-to-market messaging. So really, I'd like to ask you, what do you think are the top 5 mistakes that companies, especially early stage ones and startups, make when they first start out with their team?
Yeah. Well, number one, they actually just don't have a process. You have like Kushal doing things one way, Scott doing things another way, Richard doing things a different way. So it's just all a mess. And everybody's pitch and process is all siloed. So it's impossible to share information back and forth and really kind of land on what works best. And that makes it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to scale. So that's the biggest problem that people run into. Other problems, a lot of early stage companies have been kind of founder led sales, and founders love their product. They love to talk about their product. They want to, go through every single feature that there is. People don't need to hear about every single feature that there is. Okay. When I go buy a car, nobody tells me about every little thing that the car can do and every little part. I go buy this computer. Nobody sits there and shows me every function that the computer can do. It's too long. It's too tedious. Nobody wants to sit through that. So you just get overwhelmed with information. So you elongate the sales cycle and complicate the sales process. So that's another one. Then I think, people often make a mistake of bringing in the wrong type of sales leader at the wrong stage. You can't bring in somebody to an early stage company to run sales who wants to sit behind a desk and be, the vice president of spreadsheets and just look at data all day long. That's not how it works. Like in the beginning, you've got to have somebody who's willing to, get on the phone and send messages and build pipeline and make sure that our pitch actually works and that we can coach and teach people along the way. Like, you got to get somebody who's willing to roll their sleeves up a little bit, right? And that's a different type of sales leader than somebody who spent the last 15 years at Oracle or someplace like that. So that's a common mistake. I think people get enamored with somebody's experience at one of the big technology companies out there, and they over optimize on that, and they don't pay enough attention to somebody's willingness to kind of dig into the details a little bit. Fourth mistake: everybody underestimates how often and constantly you need to be recruiting. The biggest way to miss your number when you're trying to scale a sales organization is you don't have enough people in the seat. And I don't mean just people. I should amend that to say people who have ramped and can be productive. So companies make mistakes and they don't factor in rep churn, for example. So you'd say, well, I need 10 people at full ramp in order to hit our number. So they'll hire 10 people. But those 10 people, the odds of all 10 of them being successful and fully ramping and succeeding are quite slim, right? In a normal sales org, you probably churn 2 or 3 of those people over the course of 6 months. So you've got to overhire. So the people don't do a good job of baking the right hiring numbers into their model as they grow and try to scale. Fifth common mistake: just not enough time coaching their salespeople. Not enough time trying to make sure just not enough time making sure people get the help they need. I think too often salespeople get hired and it's assumed like, oh, Kushal was really good, we just leave her alone, let her do her thing. But like, there needs to be role play. There needs to be listening to calls and feedback. There needs to be, conversations about tonality and maybe speed of delivery and how you ran this particular demo, all the things, even to the point of managing your pipeline and going after the right accounts at the right time and making sure that we're selling to the right ICP and setting firm appointments, all these things that we kind of can take for granted that people know how to do. Well, people are human and people get away from things that work without even realizing it. So we've got to get in there and coach and take them back to the basics sometimes. So those are 5 things right there for you.
Wow, that sounds pretty incredible. I think the funniest piece for me, Scott, is basically VP of spreadsheets. I think that's incredible. Yeah, also because I really don't like spreadsheets. So that really speaks to me. But yeah, I think that's a super valid point about really getting people who are willing to get their hands dirty at the beginning when you're building out something, right? And if I just go back a little bit more to what you said, also about, founder-led sales. So I think it's probably a challenge for a lot of founders. And really the question maybe for them is, when do you know that it's time to kind of bring in a sales team and get off the main wheel yourself? When do you know? How do you know?
Well, I think you're in the beginning, really what you're trying to do is you're just trying to prove that there's some kind of product market fit, right? You're trying to generate some interest, see if you can create some revenue, learning like what resonates about your solution. Sometimes you learn what features you need to add, things like that. So you're just trying to get some traction. But there's a difference between traction in 500K ARR to 1.5 million ARR. There's a difference between that and really like accelerated growth, closing deals every day, every week, building, a pipeline that's 3 to 10x what you need the revenue to be. And there's a bandwidth issue. Every founder runs into this challenging point where they're like, oh, I don't have enough time in the day, right? Like, I don't have enough time in the day to pitch and build a pipeline and go to this product meeting and talk to marketing and all this kind of stuff. So usually what I have seen is, like I said, in this couple 100K of ARR range, that's the most common place there's like a handoff. And a lot of founders are pretty open and honest about, hey, Shaw, I don't know how to sell. Like we've been just like, getting some inbound interest here and making it work, but like, I know we don't know what we're doing. So I think founders are becoming more and more open and honest about, their weaknesses and lack of skill set in particular area. And that's about what time you need to bring in some folks who've done this before and know what they're doing to help out.
Got it. Okay. Just kind of going back, you talked about how being a founder, there's always a lot of work and not enough hours. But you also talked about how they don't have enough time to really coach a team, but it's also really super important. So how do people really balance out initially? Like, how does a founder or a starting out team really balance out the fact that they don't have enough hours and the fact that they really need to be coaching more? How do they do that?
Well, they don't. That's where they run into a problem, you know. And most founders don't have sales acumen and sales leadership background, so they can't really coach the reps that they have. You know, they're just not equipped. It would be like me trying to coach and manage an engineering team. I don't know what I'm doing. I would be totally lost. You know, I would be just asking questions about, okay, are we making progress and are we going to hit this deadline? That's about it. I don't know what else to talk about. So they can't. And I think if you get to that place as a founder where you're like, have a couple reps maybe, and you're like, man, how do I coach them? I mean, you know, they should be doing better, but I can't quite figure out what to tell them to make them better. And I don't have enough time to spend with them. Like, that's an inflection point that should tell you, okay, I need to get some help. And that help might be the form of sales leader. It could be the form of different sales tools to make you more efficient. All of the above should be on the table at that point.
Got it. Yeah, I think it sounds like the minute a founder feels, you know what, I don't have this, and you've obviously hired people who know their job, then maybe it's time to get in someone or set up a process, like you said, or get the tools in place that will kind of help the team get to where they need to be and maybe just get out of their way, I guess, at that point.
I think so. I mean, that's why you hire smart people around you, right? So they do the things that you either don't know how to do or don't want to do.
Got it. Um, Also, just curious, I think a lot of founders will be thinking, who should my first sales hire be? Should this be someone senior, at a VP level who's just going to build out the team, or should I kind of bring in a bunch of more junior reps, kind of get the sales wheel working and then bring in someone? And maybe there's a way to kind of, what's a good framework for thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, that's the two options. I've seen it work both ways. I think a lot of it depends on how much bandwidth a founder has to kind of oversee and manage a couple salespeople in the beginning, potentially how much sales acumen the founder has and confidence in their ability to, instill a decent process at the start and provide some guidance. But if you just hire a senior sales leader as your very first sales hire, to my other point, like, you better make sure you've hired somebody who's willing to do the dirty work in the beginning, and not somebody who's just kind of sitting around and strategizing and kind of waiting to be able to hire people, right? That's not the right sales leader for your stage. But both can work. What type of salespeople that you'd be looking for? You've got to look for somebody who's curious, wants to learn, is willing to do, lots of research, understands the sale, might change. Like, you might pivot quickly. Like, you might, week one be like, okay, we're going to sell to the SMB because that's going to be our sweet spot. And then you might get a couple inbound hits, and all of a sudden next week you're selling to the enterprise and your whole strategy has changed. So I think you've got to have somebody who's flexible and not rigid, somebody who's going to deal with change really well. And I think it's really important actually to find people who value being part of building something. There's something really special about building something and those early days where, like, everything you do is a win. Everything you do is brand new, some new milestone, and having that mean something to the people that you've hired, I think, is really important. So yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I love that part about building something and the magic associated with that, really, right? Because yeah, I've been in a couple of those places, and mostly it's, you're doing that thing for the first time for that company, and there's really no substitute for the high that you get out of it.
Yeah.
And then what you learn ahead from that. So yeah, I think that's pretty special, and it needs the special kind of people really to pull it off as well, and the kind of people who won't necessarily go back to the old playbooks, but kind of see what's going to work for them and their team. And maybe to go back a little bit more, Scott, to what you said earlier about rep churn and maybe, not projecting hiring in the correct way. For a lot of smaller companies, like, they're, they don't have that much cash, right? They don't have that much money, that much liquidity. How easy do you think it's going to be for them to kind of overhire in that sense and then be okay with it? I mean,
yeah,
how do they balance that?
It's not going to be easy for them, which is why they don't do it. It's really challenging. I don't have a good answer for this. I've been in sales leadership for almost 20 years. I don't know a single sales leader who's been around as long as me or longer who would tell you, I am perfect at hiring good salespeople. It doesn't happen. Hiring good salespeople is a bit of a crapshoot. I don't care how good of a recruiter you think that you are. If you're getting it right 80% of the time, like, you are crushing it when you're hiring for sales, especially in the beginning where you don't even know what works. I don't have a process yet that works. I don't have a system built and then just plug anybody in. We're trying to figure this out. Hell, we don't even know who our ICP really is yet. So it's a big challenge, which is why a lot of founders try to do some of the selling themselves. So they're not paying multiple sales reps. All I can say is do your best to make sure that the first sales hire that you're making, first one or two hires that you're making, maybe come recommended, right? They've been referred to you. They've been in this kind of super early stage startup before. They have a tremendous work ethic. They're very curious. They're going to ask lots of questions. They're going to try to document for you what's working and what's not working. They provide feedback about the product or about the pitch and the conversations that they're having. That's the best, that's going to give you the best chances, if you will, to make those first hires stick and do really, really well. And it's going to be critical because if you set super aggressive kind of revenue goals for yourself and you need, and most orgs you would need an excess of bodies to account for some of the rep churn. You don't have that option in the very beginning. So maybe temper your expectations just a little bit, not get ahead of yourself too much.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I love that part about the body count, basically. Sounds like a massacre in there.
There's plenty of places where it's been a massacre. That's where the whole churn and burn kind of references and systems go on.
Yeah, got it. So Scott, I know we've been talking about the mistakes that startups make, right? But when you go in and work with a company, what are the three things that you really kind of start off the bat with in terms of setting things up for them? What are things that they should be focusing on?
Well, we've got to build out a sales playbook. So we've got to define their ICP, their buyer personas. We've got to come up with their cold call pitch and script, a demo script, inbound script. We've got to create all their sequences and email cadences and write all the copy for all those things. Then we kind of get into like, what are the objections and rebuttals we're going to run into? What's the competitive landscape look like? What kind of tech stack should we be using? How are we going to onboard and train folks? All of this kind of stuff comes to mind right now for me. That's kind of where everybody starts. And if you have nothing, we build it from scratch. If you have something, then we kind of run an audit of what you have, and the things that you don't have, we create. And then typically comes to this kind of hiring phase where people are like, okay, we're doing this internally. It's working. We need to try to hire a couple people. And so a lot of my clients, they lean on me at that point. They're like, hey, Scott, go find me a couple salespeople. And then I just reach out to my network. I'm a part of and lead multiple sales communities. I've got a lot of followers on LinkedIn. So it's not hard for me to be like, hey, everybody, I'm working with this company called Wingman. Wingman's trying to hire 3 AEs. If you're interested, shoot me a message. My inbox will go, boom, I get two dozen inquiries, and I kind of funnel those over. So then we've got this playbook in place. We've got some people, and now you kind of put it to the test, right? And you iterate on it a little bit. You make tweaks and changes and trying to make sure things are optimized. You look at the data that's coming in. And I just kind of act as, I kind of act as a guardrail and make sure we don't go, too far off the road, and we're staying on the right track and kind of strategizing about what we do next. And sometimes after that, people are like, okay, this is working great. These reps are kind of ramping. Like, I don't have any more bandwidth. This is the founder talking. I have no more bandwidth. I can't do this. I need a VP of sales. And so I go find a VP of sales for them. That's kind of the normal, flow. And that takes place over the course of a couple months as you're working together and building these kind of things out.
Got it. So just curious, Scott, you talked about how you put out post and boom, you've got so many people kind of ready for the job. What really kind of make someone's application or email really stand out for you? I think a lot of people will be in that place where they're applying, looking for a job, etc. So what really makes you open an email and say, I'm going to try this person?
I actually don't believe in blindly applying for jobs anymore at all. So the way that you phrase the question, like that wouldn't happen, nowadays for me. But let's say I get a bunch of inquiries and people saw my post or something. They're like, hey, Scott, I saw your post about this job. Number one is, do I have a relationship with this person at all, right? Do I recognize their picture from LinkedIn or their name, from engaging on content? Have they been to Thursday Night Sales? Do they participate in any of these communities that I'm in? So the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking for familiarity, to be honest with you. And then I'm looking at what their experience looks like, but I'm mostly looking for like similarities. So if I'm an early stage company, do they have any early stage experience? Do I recognize any of the companies that they used to work at as like a big category leader or something like that? Like, let's say somebody used to sell for Outreach or someplace. Like, okay, that person might be pretty good. And then if they've gone out of their way to kind of stand out, a lot of people send a little video nowadays or do a little audio message. I've had people send me stuff in the mail. I run these events through
So
my
you can ask what?
yeah.
User can ask what?
I'm not above bribery, I guess is what I'm saying. I run these events through my Patreon group called Tequila Tuesdays. I probably get 1 or 2 bottles of tequila a month mailed to me from people who, want some help or they're trying to stand out one way or another. So think things like that initially, just in terms of like a resume type submission. But I really think the days are gone when you should be blindly submitting a resume. I mean, you should have done work from a networking perspective to get referred in or somehow, connected to and have some sort of relationship with a hiring manager. So it's not just a blind application.
That makes sense, Scott. And what I'm thinking that you're talking about how this is important for networking and when you're looking for jobs. But I'm just wondering, and this is related to one of my other questions, is this also something that, and I'm guessing the answer is yes, but really what's the best way to do it? Is this something that really companies should also be doing when they're trying to reach out to people?
100%. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, when did you start on LinkedIn and like trying to grow your brand and all that kind of thing? And like, what was your goal? The reason that I started being active on LinkedIn, because I didn't want to spend any more money trying to recruit. I wanted to have the biggest pool of candidates possible. This is when I was an operator as a VP of sales. And I thought, well, if every single person in, the city of Austin and San Francisco, like knows who I am, it'll make recruiting easier. So I went years without spending a dime on recruiting for the companies that I worked at. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings, not just from job ads, but also from not having to use agencies and staffing firms and outside recruiters, not having to hire an internal recruiter for years. That was the impetus for it. And then I took it a step farther and I would teach my team all the social tactics to build their brand and their following on LinkedIn. So now you imagine you got this company and there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people who are posting regularly, who have sizable followings, right? Being helpful, giving out thoughtful advice. Now you've got people who are scrolling through LinkedIn and they're like, what the hell is this company Wingman? Like every time I turn around, there's somebody here saying something smart. And you build a brand now around, wow, there's a lot of smart people in sales at this particular company. That would be a great place to go work. And so you turn the branding into an inbound kind of applicant machine. And not enough companies do that at all. Not enough leaders do that. They don't look at it seriously enough or invest and spend the time, but they should, because there's a truckload of ROI just sitting there waiting for you to unlock.
Got it. It sounds like you owe LinkedIn big time for all the money saved.
Well, I suppose they owe me as well, but that's a whole other story.
I was just waiting for that. Scott, I'm just wondering, like you said, companies, startups, really everyone should be focusing on getting familiar with their prospects, with the market, with prospective employee, anyone really. So when a company is just kind of starting out between, say, cold email, cold calling, social selling, what do you think, like, how do you place these things in a sales playbook? How do they kind of understand what to focus on and how does it really work?
I mean, first of all of them have to be part of the sales playbook, because just taking like a one channel approach doesn't work anymore. Back in the day, you do outside sales and you go door knock and, get in front of people. Can you imagine only trying to do that right now? You would not have a business in the last year, since none of us have really been able to go anywhere. Only cold calling people. I don't think that works anymore. There's a lot of people who don't ever pick up the phone, period. Only emailing people seems ridiculous to me. Not using social seems ridiculous to me. So all of those things have to be a part of the playbook. They have to be. You have to have this omni-channel approach where you're trying all these different things out and then figuring out what works best for you and what works best for your buyers and your prospective buyers. And then you kind of lean in a little bit more heavily to those things. So that's how it slots in there. And I think variation and variety, is a good thing. And I think creativity is becoming more and more important, because all of us get inundated with so many messages, so many notifications from so many different places. Sometimes I don't post on LinkedIn because I'm overwhelmed with how many notifications I got the day before, and I like have to catch up and catch my breath because I'll get hundreds of messages just from LinkedIn in a single day. Well, how am I supposed to deal with that plus my email inbox, plus Twitter, plus my voicemail and every other channel that I'm Slack, right? Every other, and I'm in like 10 different Slack channels because all of my clients invite me to their. So I have all these things to check. So it's like, you better stand out somehow, right? Better stand out somehow. You better be creative. Maybe you got to be funny. Maybe you got to be super personal. Maybe you got to bribe me, like I was teasing about earlier. Whatever you got to do to stand out. And so a sales team needs to be prepared and have plans for all these different approaches. And there are best practices for all of these different things. So if you decide to start using video in your prospecting and you send me a 5-minute video, that's going to be a no. I'm not going to watch a 5-minute video. You got about 30 seconds, maybe 45, and then you got to get out. So we've got to document all these things because not everybody knows the best practices for all these different approaches. So it's just really important to have those tools in the playbook, and they'll evolve over time as you learn about what works and what doesn't work. But you've got to get what's locked in your head onto paper. And that's how the transfer of knowledge occurs. And that's how you can go from one salesperson to 100 salespeople who are doing things the right way.
Got it. Sounds like, I guess, standing out, like you said, is the most important thing. And right next to that is also not a 5-minute video, like you said, but something shorter that someone will actually see. So yeah, so I think it's great that we've kind of covered how people and processes and playbooks are really important for any type of sales team. We're also talking a little bit about technology and tools. And I'm just curious, what sort of tools do you think are really essential when a company is just starting out with its sales process? Is there a minimum that you say, let's get ABC, or how do you go about that? How does sales tech fit into the picture?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a quote unquote ideal tech stack for a sales leader. I think one of the things that happened with COVID was, let's say companies had 10 tools. I think about 6 or 7 of them got cut, and people chopped down to the bare bones that they would call essential. So for me, I think there's really only 3 or 4 that I would consider essential, right? I think your sales team has got to have a CRM. I find that might sound like and table stakes to some people, but I talk to companies every single day who are using Excel or something else, who haven't invested in a CRM yet because it's too expensive. I think CRM has got to be table stakes. And then I think you need an enablement platform. I really do. I'm a huge proponent of SalesLoft. Outreach is great. I know wonderful people there. VanillaSoft is good. I know people there. One of those, right? To put your sequences in, manage your pipeline, and reach out to people the right way at the right time, right? All the different touch points. And then the next one I'd probably go to is like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is a little bit dependent upon what you're selling and what industry and if they're active. I'm thinking more like if I'm selling B2B software, like somebody has to have LinkedIn Sales Navigator in order to work. And then the last thing for me is conversational intelligence. It's the wingman, it's the gong, it's the chorus. Like I've got to find ways to listen into my team. We're in a remote world. I can't just sit behind you while you make phone calls. I've got to have the ability on demand to listen to what my people are saying and doing, provide them feedback, and I have got to find a way to do it efficiently. I want to sit and listen to a 45-minute phone call. I don't have time for that because I have, 250 salespeople. How am I going to do that? If I can punch in and punch out at certain sections, provide 1 or 2 snippets of feedback to reps, and boom, on to the next. That's my table stakes. Like those are my essentials. I don't know how I could function without those. Everything else to me lands on some spectrum of optional. So for me, that's my sort of foundational tech stack.
Got it. Some great points there, Scott. So I think one of my last questions around this piece is really, to work with so many companies and startups and so many sales teams and leaders, what's maybe the one thing that you really wish that they would do differently or kind of take seriously?
Oh man, a lot of different ways I could go with that question. I think where I will go though is just stop talking about yourself. The most common mistake I think that I would come across is everybody just talks about their product and talks about their solution, nobody cares. You only care if you believe that you have a problem related to this particular solution or this particular tool. So I think the biggest mistake is just not getting people to disclose and admit that they're struggling with something, and then not educating them on why they should care about fixing that particular problem, and not spending the time helping them recognize that, wow, this is pretty important. Like, I should do something about this now rather than 6 months from now. And after we've done all that, now having a conversation about what we do and our solution is way more impactful, and it will be met with, open eyes and open ears. And so that's the biggest mistake. I cringe every time I see a process or I listen to salespeople who are like, "Hey, Kushal, this is Scott from Surf and Sales. How are you today?" Great. Well, at Surf and Sales, we do blah, 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 blah. That is like my worst nightmare.
Is that still happening?
Oh God, all the time, all over the place. It happens at some companies that you've kind of heard of, and you'd be shocked. And they have a lot of reps who are not doing it that way, who are doing well. And they have a lot of reps who are doing it that way, who are doing terrible. And you're just like, why can't everybody get on the same page? So that's my biggest kind of chief complaint.
Got it. I know I said last question, but another one, which is really, why do you think it's so hard for people to kind of get on the same page when it comes to not putting yourself first? I mean, we know it, but we still don't seem to follow it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think people just get a little bit excited, a little bit nervous, a little bit excited, and they feel the pressure and the and the urge to like produce right now, book this meeting now, close this deal now, and they just don't play the long game. They're too focused on the short term and the immediate results, and that's it's a bit of a societal thing. It's a bit of a sales culture thing, and you've got to have leaders at the top who understand the right way to do this, and give their team underneath them the room and the space to do things the right way, right? And there's still not quite enough of that, right? So we still see this problem.
Great stuff, Scott. I think we got a really neat episode of On the Flip Side. Thanks so much for taking on time for this.
Thanks for having me.